everyone. I am Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet, and I am finally doing another episode of Heart of the Night Reviews. I haven't done one of these in a good little while. The last one I did was a review of Lumberjack Man, which was supposed to be a full 10-movie box set, but was actually just Lumberjack Man in the DVD case of a 10-movie horror box set, which was disappointing. But now I will actually be going back to my roots and reviewing this cheap Mill Creek box set of 10 horror movies, all of which look to be fairly low budget and all of which came out at some point in the 2010s. So, don't know how that's going to fare in terms of quality, especially given what I just watched, but it's nice to be getting back to that vibe of movie again, even though I really enjoy doing a lot of the higher brow movies and the movies requested by other people. I did start Heart of the Night Reviews by reviewing 30 movies from an Echo Bridge box set, so nice to be getting back to that, or like a similar vibe. But anyway, this is a box set of 10 horror films released by Echo Bridge. Based on the posters, they don't look too terribly promising, but it was $3 from a secondhand store, so I can't complain that much. But anyway, the movie I am going to be reviewing today came out in 2011, and it is called Bunnyman. Bunnyman was directed by, written by, and stars, briefly, as Bunnyman in the Bunnyman suit. There's a lot of people in the Bunnyman suit. Carl Lindbergh. He is also the writer and director of the subsequent 3 Bunnyman movies. He wrote and directed Shadows of the Dead in 2004 and Shattered Lives in 2009, prior to the Bunnyman movies, and he is in the Bunnyman suit in all of the Bunnyman movies except for the Bunnyman Massacre in 2014. And he also acts in Shadows of the Dead in the 2022 short film Lonesome Highway. This film also stars Joshua Lang, who was in the Bunnyman Massacre and 2017's Bunnyman Vengeance as Bunnyman. A lot of people in the Bunnyman suit. A lot of people. And he was also in The Beautiful Ones in 2017, Get a Job Dave in 2017, and unfortunately in 2019, The Haunting of Sharon Tate, which is a whole other can of worms that I can't even get into today, but basically, I haven't even seen it, but I don't really want to. Just know that it's like a really distasteful horror movie that's kind of exploiting the real-life horrible murder of Sharon Tate by the Manson family. And that's all I really need to know to not want to watch it. But yeah. This film stars Cheryl Texiera, who has a really interesting track record. She was in 15 episodes of the Disney Channel show Girl Meets World, 2 episodes of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the 2018 film Encounter, and did additional voices for the video game The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020. This film stars Matthew Albrecht, who is credited in this film and a few other early works of his as Matthew Phillips. He was also in The Eyes in 2012, Phase 2 in 2013, and The Artist in 2011. And this film stars Elena Gianchi, who was in Blood Painting in 2016, Lazarus Rising in 2015, and District C11 in 2017. So this movie follows a group of teenagers who are on a road trip. They are pursued by a truck with an unknown driver who manages to get them in a bit of vehicle trouble, at which point they get out, look for help, and have an unfortunate run-in with a bunch of backwoods cannibals, one of whom happens to wear a bunny suit. The score for this film was done by Peter Scartabello, who did the score for The Spine of Night in 2021, No Time to Fail in 2022, The Brazilian Templar Mystery in 2020, and all of the other Bunnyman movies. Kind of a tight-knit little group of people who made these things. The score, when it is happening in a noticeable way, is kind of cool. There's a very music boxy nature to it, especially in the opening of the film, that kind of persists throughout the rest of the film. There's a lot of like little bell noises and chimey things that'll be in the score, and all of that's undercut by a very like low, noisy, I don't even know what instrument it is, but kind of a lower tone that's very scrapey and dissonant and ambient, and just kind of used as background throughout the rest of the film. There are distinct melodies in the score at some points, but really the score stays out of this film's way and is just kind of in the background and is not particularly memorable. The rest of the film's gonna be kind of similar. That said, though, I do like the contrast of the childishness of the chiminess with the horror of the rest of the film, because of the juxtaposition of the brutality of the overall film with the childishness of the bunny suit. So it has that going for it. And it happens that Bunnyman, when he is brutally fucking torturing people, likes to listen to classical music, which provides another interesting juxtaposition. You also get to see Bunnyman kind of conducting before committing the absolutely fucking atrocious deed. So that was interesting, I guess. I actually very much like the cold open of this film, which is a victim trying to escape the clutches of the cannibal family. There's a really like raw, shaky cam cinematography to it, which they really make into something special by putting filters over the cinematography and formatting it a little bit smaller to make it look like it was shot on gritty, like I don't know what millimeters are. I'm not a technical person in terms of actual physical film that way, but it looks like it was shot on film and it's kind of damaged and decayed, and it gives a very Texas Chainsaw home movies in House of Thousand Corpses type feel, which I thought was actually really cool, and which they bring back for the end credits of the movie. And that is probably the most stylish thing about this movie, which is a low bar, but I did like it. I say that, but I actually do think they did a very good job with overall the look of this film. The low budget is very apparent in every scene. The camera quality itself is not that good. The production design does leave a little bit to be desired, but overall, the cinematography is consistently visually appealing. The shots are composed nicely. There's some decent camera movement and some really good shots in terms of storytelling. For example, there's a run-in with a really nasty backwoods hick character who I don't think is actually related to the cannibal family at all, but they have a run-in with him at some point, and there is a shot where he's reaching down and you can see that he has a gun, and you're like, oh god, what's he gonna do? And he reaches behind the gun and he pulls out a bottle of alcohol, and it was a nice little bit of visual playing with expectation that was decent. And the movie does make the best of its setting. There's a lot of muted colors, a lot of barrenness. Once we get to the actual cabin in which the cannibal family lives, it's very gritty. They clearly raided a lot of secondhand stores and garages for whatever junk they could find and arranged it pretty artfully to get a sense of the weird knickknacks that this family has acquired over the years. Again, it's still nothing on the level of like a Texas Chainsaw or a House of Thousand Corpses. Yes, I'm going to keep comparing this movie to both of those throughout this review, but they do a really good job with what limitations they had in terms of the overall visual style of this film. There are also a lot of shots of Bunnyman in silhouette. Notably, there's one where they like hear footsteps and they're like, oh god, who's coming? And they can see a silhouette through the window, but it's a silhouette with a huge bunny head and bunny ears. And there's kind of a great humor to the kind of the horror silhouette, but it being a bunny suit. I wish I could say that the sound design was as good as the visual. Again, they're working with whatever limitations they had in terms of budget and resources, but it doesn't work as well. I think really good sound design could have really, really heightened this film in terms of its effectiveness, but it just didn't quite work for me. I think the biggest misstep is during the little shot on film cold open, there is a knife thrown at one of the characters. Speaking of which, I meant to say this at the beginning, a lot of spoilers in this review. Spoilers throughout. I may edit that in at the beginning of this review and edit it out. So this is your reminder, editor Emily. In the cold open of this film, a knife is thrown at a character. In this scene, which has heretofore been silent aside from the score and like the edited in like clicking of the film, I think, we get the sound of the knife going into the person, which I feel like they put it in there because you just couldn't get like a sense of the impact of the knife without the sound, but it does destroy what they had already kind of set up as this being completely shot on film without a sound track having been recorded with it. So it does kind of detract from that a little bit. But in terms of the sound design of the rest of the film, it is clearly struggling with what limitations they had. But there are a lot of violent scenes in this movie that are forced to imply things and could have been so much more effective in their horrificness had there been really good Foley or sound design. But again, I don't know what budget or resources they had. So they did okay with what they have, but it could have really benefited from better Foley and overall sound design. And story-wise, this film, again, has some good technical things happening with its plot. They make the choice to start this film with 2 out-of-context escape sequences, which I thought was immediately intriguing, but I wasn't sure if it worked or not, because you've got the one that's shot on film, and then you've got another little attempted escape sequence, which ends with the victim kind of a la Texas Chainsaw jumping into the back of a truck for safety, only to realize that the cannibals actually own the truck. But I was like, oh, that's kind of a daring choice. I'm immediately kind of intrigued, but will it actually work? And the answer is actually yes, because we then have that truck becoming the truck that is following our main characters in the first scene. So it is kind of the inciting incident, first point of tension in their story, which happens like immediately, which I do take some issue with because they don't really take time to explore who these characters are, but I'll get to that. I ended up writing in my notes, 10 minutes in, there's been 2 attempted escapes and a car chase, and I still don't know who our main characters are. Good or not, I think the 2 attempted escape scenes and the car chase are decent. But the fact that I still didn't know who our main characters were was not. The dialogue feels like it's just a contrivance to keep the plot moving forward. Like, it is delivered well by the actors, but it's just a lot of like, hey, he's gaining on us. Hey, do we have enough water? Hey, let's go over here. Hey, we should split up. Occasionally there's a little bit of character stuff in terms of like grief and moralizing over things, and they get into that a little bit more at the end of the movie, but mostly it's technical stuff, which is, you know, the stuff they should be worrying about in order to survive. But this movie doesn't have a lot to say. It just kind of goes and keeps going with what it's doing and doesn't stop to tell us anything about anyone. And maybe that's fine for some people who just want a exploitation horror movie and don't care about character. But I love some really, really trashy exploitation and horror movies, and the ones I like still feel like they have something to say, whether the director or writer intended that or not. And there's something interesting about the characters, and nothing in the dialogue ever really elevates us beyond the immediate tension that's happening. So the characters never become more than a group of teens in a car. We don't even know where they're going, by the way. They never tell us that. And a group of backwoods killer cannibals who have a little bit more interesting going on, but not that much. The opening sequence is kind of a slightly less good version of Duel. It is again, a fairly drawn-out car chase sequence, but it really is just this big truck with the windows blacked out. We have no idea who's in it. We just know that it's following our main characters and is kind of antagonizing them and fucking with them without ever getting out of the truck. And it's very, very Duel. So I wasn't expecting that out of this kind of movie, and I thought it was kind of cool. But again, Duel just did it better. If I want to see that done well, I'll just watch Duel. So for what it is, it was neat to see in this movie, but I've seen it executed better other places. But it does stop feeling Duel as soon as we cut inside the truck and we see the glove of the bunny suit on the steering wheel, which I thought was a fun little touch. And then the first death of the film is probably the most disturbing to me. I don't think the film properly established, or maybe I was just, again, not clear on who these characters were, but it didn't really clearly establish for me that the character of Jack got under the car to look at it. Maybe I think there might have been a flat-out scene where that happened, but because I didn't know who the characters were, I thought he was a different character, or maybe those were different characters. I never got to know who Jack was, so I hadn't realized that he had gotten under the car. But anyway, Jack gets under the car. The, as of now, anonymous truck driver comes behind them with the truck and rams into it and rams their vehicle forward while Jack's still under the car. And at first they're just like, wow, what a fucking asshole. And they get out and they look under the car, and we don't really see what's happened to Jack, but it's implied, and it is upsetting. It is very, very upsetting. It's more upsetting than any of the more kind of over-the-top traditional slasher deaths. It has kind of this Adam Green-esque cruelty to it. It was actually orchestrated by the killer in this case, but it feels less like a direct act of violence and more of just a horrifying accident, almost. Like, it wasn't accidental, but do you get what I'm saying here? Like, because it was this sort of contrivance where it wasn't this direct, like, machete to the head or anything, it was a car getting bumped and then running over this person, it kind of hits closer to home as something that might accidentally happen to someone in this much more disturbing way. So I won't say I liked that, but it was one of the most genuinely upsetting things in the film, and the characters are actually kind of processing that grief throughout. So, points for that, I guess. And then as we get towards the end of the film and things start to pick up a little bit, I still don't know who these characters are, where they were even trying to go. I know fairly little about these cannibals, so they're just kind of running around this backwoods area, and people are getting murdered, and I just stopped caring at some point. It just wasn't doing anything for me, because I didn't know or care who these people even were. And then I started to like it even less, because, big content warning here, but there is a non-graphic but incredibly unnecessary and upsetting scene of sexual assault against one of the female characters, who manages to escape from that. There's no, again, like, penetration or anything, but she is sexually assaulted. It's incredibly upsetting. And then she briefly escapes, only to immediately get brutally tortured and killed. There is something about that scene of sadism that is well thought out in its twistedness and its uncomfortableness in a way that I can appreciate. But at that point, I was just having a bad time, because I was like, this movie is just being sadistic for its own sake. It's not driven by anything about the characters. It's not even showing off creative gore. It's just sadistic. It's like a well-constructed linear sequences of events that is an excuse to put horror set pieces in a movie that are, some of them disturbing, some of them, their disturbingness is kind of marred by the production values, and some of them just fall flat because they can't even show off any creative gore, and I'll get to the effects. And then at the end of the movie, the end's kind of a mixed bag for me, because Rachel and her boyfriend, whose name I don't care about, managed to escape from Bunnyman and his family and are running away, only to find themselves pursued by the truck again. So their brilliant plan is to have Rachel pretend to be dead, Rachel's boyfriend kind of pick her up and carry her like he's a universal monster carrying the damsel in distress who's fainted, and be like, she's dead. You've taken everything away from me. I don't have any weapons. I don't care anymore. And just sets her on the ground. And then Bunnyman gets out of the truck, picks her up, and brings her in. She is, of course, not dead. She gets up and she stabs Bunnyman. And that plan just feels so incredibly contrived, because these are unhinged, really, really unhinged people. And, like, she can pretend to be dead and use that to sneak into places, but at any point Bunnyman could just, like, slam her against a tree because he doesn't give a shit. And they could have played with that in terms of tension for that, but they don't do that either. He's just like, oh, nothing wrong here, takes her into the truck, she wakes up, she stabs him. I do appreciate that the movie ends with our two final characters driving off with the truck that had been attacking them at the beginning of the movie. They are now in power, so that was cool. And I like that, like, one of their very last lines in the movie is just them. I don't remember which one of them says it, but one of them just goes, "We're gonna need a lot of therapy." That was cute. I said I like the style of the end credits. I also think there's some interesting nuggets of story in there. In the end credits, we see people credited as Bunnyman's mother and this and that, and it looks like the end credits are to some extent telling the story of Bunnyman's former family that fell apart and became these backwoods cannibals. So that was kind of cool. And then in terms of characters, I really do not have a lot to say about them. I think my first note I took on characters says most of what you need to know. It just says teens in a car. 2 are dating. 1 is sexist. They don't know how to hydrate. Versus man in bunny suit with big truck. And we do meet a few other characters, but that's the gist of the movie for a while. And then I mentioned there's an exchange with a hick character who they go down his walkway, which is lined with crosses, and they try to ask him if they can use his phone, and he just kind of goes around the question, and he's like, depends who's asking and why, and eventually they're just like, look, man, you can keep fucking with us, but just tell us, are you going to let us use your phone or not? And he's just like, no. And then he starts verbally harassing one of the female members of the group, and it's disgusting, and it is a genuinely uncomfortable exchange with a lot of weird long pauses and a lot of just verbal dancing around things, and I thought that was decently written, if not that fun to watch. And a little after that, we do get some character from Tiffany, who's the girl who had the absolute worst of it thrown at her at the end of this movie, as I've already told you, but she starts moralizing a little bit. She's really grieving Jack's death, and she's like, maybe this is our fault, maybe this is karma coming back on us for killing Jack, and it's like, ma'am, literally, you did not kill Jack. He was under the car, and these fucking assholes slammed into the back of it, and they killed him, but, like, obviously, because they weren't looking after him, they still feel guilty, and she's the only one who really verbalizes that. And she's the one character who kind of loses her cool and is like, I don't see why everyone else is so calm about this. And they're like, we're not. We just have to keep our cool and get out of this situation because we have no food or water and we're stranded in the middle of nowhere. But I liked that little exchange, and then I thought they were going to use that as an excuse to separate Tiffany from the group because she kind of storms off for a moment. But then they just have her back by the next scene, so it wasn't really for that. There's also a group of surprise cannibals who aren't a surprise, which I thought was entertaining. One of our characters who we meet later, we see sitting in the car before our main characters try to come up and talk to her, and she's talking to someone who is allegedly her brother, but we don't really know their relationship, and she's just like, what should we tell them? At some point, she's just like looking at them in their car, and she's just like, I want to just run these fuckers over right now, and then either her brother or her is like, but we can't. We'll have to clean them off the pavement, and I don't want to do that again, so I guess we'll just tell them to go to the cabin. So I kind of liked that we get a little bit of the killers' perspectives on the situation, and it creates a little bit of fun, dramatic irony, even though it does spoil what could have been an okay surprise. We do learn why Bunnyman is Bunnyman eventually. It is because he is kind of disfigured, hates his own face, is an outcast, and wears a mask because of that. Why a bunny in particular? There's no particular thematic reason for it. It just seemed like it was an accessible disguise to have, which is kind of disappointing given that the name of the movie is Bunnyman, and there's really no thematic reason for the bunny thing. If this was a goofy slasher with like Easter themed kills, I would be very okay with that. It's not that kind of movie, but I at least wish they tried to tie in the bunny suit thematically, because Bunnyman could have worn literally anything else and it would have been the exact same movie. The scenes where Tiffany is being tormented made me incredibly upset, but I also think it's some of the best acting in the movie. She's like screaming, she's in pain, she's sobbing, she like faints because of the pain and shock at some point. It's very, considering the quality of the rest of the acting in this movie, it's very realistic and very effective and upsetting, and it's probably what they cast her for, to be honest. But it's very good acting, and it made me very upset. And then shortly after that, we get our classic backwood cannibals at the dinner table scene. Sans victim chained up eating with them, but these kinds of movies have to have one of those. And we do learn some interesting things about the characters from this. Actually, there is a character tied up near the dinner table, poor Rachel. At the same time as we learn why Bunnyman wears the mask in that scene, we learn that the girl, who is the girl from the scene with the cannibal dramatic irony that I mentioned earlier, she's kind of the matriarch of the family, even though we don't really know what her age is in relation to any of the other characters, but she's just like, I told you 1,000 times, take off the fucking mask while you're at the dinner table, and it's very upsetting, and it's an interesting little bit of a family dynamic. And we learn that there's just a chained up guy in there who seems to be part of the family. He's the one who assaults Tiffany, unfortunately, but he's just kind of a weird feral little guy on a chain, and we learn that he likes to watch Felix the Cat cartoons a little bit later on. Oh, the Rachel tied up is a completely later scene. I lied. It is in that scene that we learn that chained up guy likes Felix the Cat cartoons, and through dialogue between Rachel with her, it's not a dialogue between, because Rachel has her mouth duct tape shut, but in this scene of the girl talking at Rachel, we learn that she's obsessed with being pretty. She's like, you do think I'm pretty, don't you? But I think you're prettier than me, and I don't think that's okay, and internalized beauty standards are a fucking nightmare. She's also a slut-shamer, and she makes a bunch of assumptions about Rachel based on her appearance and kind of antagonizes her and tortures her for that. And then there's a moment where she kind of just goes in and kisses Rachel on her duct tape mouth, and it's like, are we throwing in, like, just a bit of a casual predatory lesbian thing in here for no reason? That's just great. That's really great. That scene is also kind of fun in some ways, though, because it's just like Bunnyman and chained up guy are in the background, and the girl will turn around to them and ask, like, should I torture her? Should I do this? And there's just a moment where Bunnyman just goes, and then it pans over to chained up guy, and he's not even paying attention. He's just off in the other corner, like, doing weird little feral goblin person stuff with things on the ground. It was pretty funny, to be honest. And then shortly after that, Rachel's boyfriend comes in, manages to rescue her, and unduct tape her mouth. And, like, throughout that scene of trying to get her out of the house, she just starts hysterically laughing and then breaks down crying and goes back into laughing. And it's this little just breakdown into madness for a moment that was one of the best acting moments in the movie, to be honest. So props for that. And then effects-wise, there's a little bit of gore in this movie. The victim from the beginning gets drawn and quartered in probably the most graphic scene in the movie, although it's kind of silly because she does, like, look down at her body and then fall back, and it's like, there's no sense that she's actually been killed. The rest of the gore in the movie really does leave something to be desired. Conceptually, a lot of it's pretty disturbing, but we don't see a lot, and tonally, I can't really tell what this movie's trying to do, because some of it's really fucked up and disturbing, and some of it's really goofy, and I feel like I would have enjoyed this movie a lot more if it had the budget for, like, Hatchet-style gore or something. I have mixed feelings on Hatchet, but really the star attraction of Hatchet is the funny dialogue and the really over-the-top kills. And I think a movie like this could have benefited from some more creative gore set pieces. What we get is just, because of the limited budget, a lot more reserved and kind of a lot more realistic and disturbing for that reason, but because of having to cut away and because of the lack of good sound design, even that doesn't feel as realistic and disturbing, so a lot of it just doesn't land, unfortunately. But that's really all of my thoughts on this movie. Overall, it's a very competently made movie, especially on the budget that we've got. I just think the screenplay kind of sucks and it kind of hampers the whole movie. I do wish it had better gore and better sound design, but I really, really wish that we at least just had a reason written in for these characters to be going where they're going. I think if we had that, we could actually know things about who these characters are and why they wanted to go to the place they were going when their car got knocked off the road by Bunnyman. This movie seems to care a lot more about who the serial killers are, and we don't even get that much of who they are. It is definitely a film that's more concerned with moving fast and having a lot of exciting sequences in it, but I think the fact that they didn't really either have the budget or put a lot into the gore sequences or the sound design, again, kind of hampers just the sensory thrill of those scenes, even if you just throw the plot out the window. So, given its limitations, it's an okay movie, but it doesn't really do anything that I haven't seen done in Duel or Texas Chainsaw or House of a Thousand Corpses, and those are really movies I would watch any day over Bunnyman, probably. And the just out-of-nowhere sexual assault in the middle of the movie really dropped it down a notch for me, too. If that wasn't in there, I probably would have been nicer to the movie, but that did kind of fuck me up. So, overall, if what I've said sounds appealing to you, if you like lower-than-low-budget slashers and just seeing how they riff on the genre, this doesn't do anything new, really, but I can see some of the people who I'm connected with in the horror community maybe enjoying it. I don't know where it's available. Don't stream things on Tubi right now. Fox News owns Tubi, but if this sounds cool to you, seek it out. You know, find it at a second-hand store or find a cheap Mill Creek box set online and check it out if you really want to. I'm probably not going to revisit it, but let me know if you've seen any of the other Bunnyman movies and if they're any good, because maybe they improve as they go on, maybe they're worse, maybe they're the exact same movie over and over. I wouldn't know, because I'm not really planning on putting a lot of effort into seeking out other Bunnyman movies, but hey, let me know. That is my review of Bunnyman. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!